Hello, everybody, and welcome. I am Dr. Dan Kalish. I'm here today to talk to you about metabolic health. And we are putting on this webinar in conjunction with Diagnostic Solutions. I want to thank them for helping organize and get the word out about this class. And we want to talk about the Diagnostic Solutions updated, newly formatted organic acids test, which is the finest organic acids in the land. And you guys are all here, hopefully, with the enthusiasm that would drive one to learn how to interpret this test. So a little bit about my background. We're going to look at a few slides, a fair number of slides, but I'll try to go through them, in a prompt manner. And then we're going to look at some sample labs, do a little interpretation so you can get a feel for how amazing this test is. I've also divided this webinar up into a beginning part, which is in the beginning, and an advanced part, which is for advanced doctors. So if you've been doing organic acids for years, you may find the second half of this lecture to be quite helpful. And I tried to set this talk up so anyone could benefit from it, whether you're brand new to this work or you've been doing it for a long time. So I am Dan Kalish. I've been running the Kalish Institute since 2006. We've trained over 7,000 practitioners on building successful functional medicine practices. I've worked with the Mayo Clinic on research studies on the Kalish method. The thing I'm most proud of, I've worked with Dr. Richard Lord for almost 15 years now, and he is the scientist that imagined and dared to dream about organic acids testing back in the late 1960s. He is the one that set up the first machines and organized the first tests for integrative medicine on organic acids in the 1980s. He retired a while ago, and he and I have been working together closely. And for about 40 years, Richard saw every single organic acids test done at the lab, which is like hundreds of thousands of them. And his knowledge base and his scientific interest in this is probably at the top of our entire field, even to this day, even though he's retired. So he and I have worked together very closely with his intention of training me so that I get out there and do these kinds of talks. There's over 1,000 people signed up for this talk. So I'll tell Richard that next week and he'll get a big smile on his face. He'll say, "Good job, Dan. You're doing it. Good job, Dan." So we're passing on Richard Lord's work to the next generation. I'm also IFM certified. Hey, it's not easy to pass that test. I'm proud of that. And I've been in practice for a really long time. So we have a special thing going here with Diagnostic Solutions Lab as an offer. And the offer is just get your phone out, scan that QR code. I love QR codes. It just saves, you don't have to remember the URL or the link or whatever. Scan that QR code and type in DSL24 when you check out, and you will have an amazing experience with even more educational stuff from us, okay? So you'll learn about this even more in depth, this subject, with the free masterclass. It's a much more fully built out version of what we're doing right now in this webinar, okay? So if you're more interested in this information, then you get kind of curious from what I'm saying today, check out the QR code there, and you'll get a masterclass in this that I set up, again, based on Richard Lord's work. So we want to talk about how to identify major metabolic issues. And we can't cover everything today, but I'm covering off one of the most important ones that we use every day in our practices. Number one, detoxification. Number two, methylation, neurotransmitter balance or brain functioning, and then also yeast overgrowth and some gut stuff. And then I save my favorite for last, which is the mitochondrial aspects of this. You can't really turn around these days without having somebody say the word mitochondria. It's sort of the topic of the moment, maybe the topic of the decade, because we've all figured out how important mitochondria are to brain function, to heart function, for athletes, for chronic fatigue patients. Super, super, super important, okay? Super, super, super important. And it doesn't get more important than that. And then we're gonna also talk about, your sort of typical patient, the anxiety, depression, the people that are gaining weight, the people that just can't sleep well. How can you help those folks too? I could not talk to a new patient now without having their organic acids test in front of me. It's the most vital and important information on the basics of cell physiology. And once you learn about the test, I think you will feel the same way too. When we talk to doctors about it, though, it's a very intimidating test. There's a lot of fancy terms, and it can be overwhelming. But we want to try to dispel that in today's webinar by giving you really simple ways to get started. I even put some protocols in to this slideshow at the end, so you have some starter protocols as well. A bunch of you are asking for the QR code, which is a good sign. So there's the QR code, scan it, take a picture of this. The code to get the freebie thing is DSL24, DSL24. Okay, and we will be sending out emails with all this information. If you're driving right now or something and you can't scan, don't like scan on the freeway, okay? We don't want anybody getting hurt over this webinar, but we'll get this information out to you again in an email in the next day or so. So what is it? What is organic acids testing? Well, I think if you understand a little bit of the origin story, it'll make sense. So when the testing was first developed, it was developed for newborn babies to determine whether they had a rare genetic disorder that was potentially life-threatening. And that was in the late 1960s when Richard Lord was in graduate school. He saw this happening, and every baby born in the United States for decades now has had an organic acids, amino acids, right? They do a little heel stick and they take a little bit of blood and they check for all these issues in newborn babies. Because if you have one of these metabolic disorders and it's severe, you could die in early childhood, and they want to know right away. What Richard saw was that you could use the same testing technology with different reference ranges to determine genetic variability in adults for certain nutrient needs. How brilliant is that? And then the test became, over the years, kind of a chronic illness evaluation for tough patients, and it got kind of branded as a nutritional evaluation. It is so much more than that. It is a look at both the status of your patient in terms of their diet and what they're doing with nutrition and how well they can absorb. But even more importantly, it's a genetic screening tool to see if there are any outrageous genetic blocks that are showing up in a functional way, the functional expression. The cell is not functioning right. You can see all that. And the vast majority of patients that I have worked with, when you really look at the things that are messed up on the organic acids that are severe, most of it's not diet related. And it's not nutritionally related. Like, you're not going to eat enough broccoli to get, your glutathione marker fixed. It's mostly driven by gut infections. So you also have to do the GI map test for all these patients. It's driven by liver toxicity issues. So you have to clean up the liver. It's driven by the stresses of life, right? And oftentimes there's a sort of an accompaniment to these problems that has a genetic basis. And you can determine that with these tests. You can use these tests as a basic nutritional screening tool, or you can use them as a way to see the functional expression of a genetic disorder, or both if you want. So this lecture is divided up. The first half is about the basic use of organic acids testing, and the second half of this lecture is about how you can look at the same test data from a genetic perspective. And who do you want to test? Every single patient should have this test. Anyone who is over the age of 2 on up. If you're not ordering organic acids testing on every patient, in my mind, you're not fulfilling the role of a functional medicine a doctor or practitioner. You're not doing a full assessment. You really have to do this stuff. I was intimidated by this for the first 10 years of my practice. The first 10 years of my practice, I only ordered organic acids when I had to, basically, because there's like nothing else was working. This was the nothing else was working test, and it still is for a lot of people. But when I started to order this test on every single patient, completely changed my life, my practice, my patient outcomes. So I really want to encourage you, even if it's a little scary, start to order this on every single patient. You also want to retest organic acids once or twice a year. You will learn more on the second and third tests than you did on the first one. So I want to encourage that behavior too. And patients love it. Once you get into this and you're good at assessing these, patients are going to love it. So I use this as my basic yearly assessment for all my patients. Doesn't really matter what their problem is. If they have weight gain or they have fatigue or depression, anxiety, if they have a complex patient, if it's a longevity patient, even better. This is like the best longevity screening tool on the planet, okay? When we look at the test and we see how intimidating it is, I think one way to sort of de-stress you as a practitioner is to simplify it. And as much as we could, and I have a full 2-year curriculum on organic acids. I have a 2-year intense curriculum on organic acids that Richard Lord and I developed together. But you don't have time to do that right now. Most of you probably won't take 2 years to really study the subject, but you should still be ordering the test. We want simple models that you can use in the first couple years of your doing this that are going to be clinically effective and cover, honestly, like cover 75% of what you need to know anyways. And that extra 25% you can fill in as the years roll by. So it's easy to look at this from a systems point of view and from a big picture point of view of what's the physiological damage that's occurring in the patient. Are they inflamed? Are they catabolic? Are they insulin resistant? Do they have a lot of oxidative stress? Inflammation, on this test, you can see specifically neuroinflammation, which is pretty amazing. Catabolic physiology means that the stress response is engaged, and this test checks for the catecholamines that are elevated during stress. That's epinephrine and norepinephrine. Insulin resistance is all over this test and in great detail. You can see insulin resistance before it would even show up on blood work. And oxidative stress is probably, in some ways, what the test is the most famous for. So all of these things are measured on this test. And these are common things that you're going to see in almost all of your patients on a regular basis, right? So where's the damage coming from? You know, inflammation, catabolic physiology, insulin resistance, oxidative stress, and then what's getting damaged? This test shows you that too. Mitochondria, DNA, is it fat soluble, water soluble? Where's the damage occurring? Is the liver okay? All of these things are measured out, okay? If the mitochondria are damaged, and that's kind of one of the main concerns here, that could be from toxin exposure. And you can also measure the detox pathways on the same test. So you can see all of these different factors. When I look at this test, and this sort of runs, this is a different from way the lab companies analyze it, but I just break it down into 4 subject areas for patient education purposes, okay? Number 1, mitochondria, or you could call it metabolism if you want. So metabolism, brain, detoxification, and gut. Pretty much everybody understands those terms patient-wise, right? Metabolism, brain, detoxification, and gut function. Instead of metabolism, you could say mitochondria. Instead of brain, you could say neurotransmitter metabolites. Instead of detoxification, you could say detoxification pathways or whatever. And then instead of gut, you could say gut microbiome / metabolites. But to keep it simple, mitochondria, brain, detox, and gut. Those 4 areas. So you want to have a protocol that you can use for mitochondria, brain, gut, and detox. And if you just have that, you can help a lot of people, and then you can start to fill in later with the other issues that we all need to know. Oh my gosh, this is the supplements associated with it. I'm going to skip through this. I don't want to freak you out, but you could take a snapshot of that if you want. And that's not even that necessary, but it's just to show you how complicated it is. But we want to simplify this, grossly. So now, one of the easy ways to start is with the biggest picture possible. And when we look at the lab, I'll show you, you think the biggest picture possible, okay? What's happening with protein? What's happening with fat? What's happening with carbohydrate? What's happening with the body's ability to metabolize? So as much as you could get into the minutia on like, I don't know, zinc levels or something, or copper levels, how much copper is indicated based on this test. We want to think big picture too. And usually patients have big picture problems, thankfully. And if you fix the big picture problems, a lot of times people get better. So you probably could have a super successful practice for 10 years and never mess with a patient's copper levels. Can you detect copper problems on this test? Yeah, you can. Can you determine like how many milligrams of copper you might want to give? Yeah, you probably can. But do you need to? Absolutely not. We want to think big picture so you can get the bulk of your patients better. And here are the big picture items. Beta oxidation, and we don't talk about this enough in the various conferences and seminars. This is like the major source of energy in the human body. When we're at rest, like you are probably all right now at rest, unless one of you is on a treadmill or something. When you're at rest, the vast majority of your ATP comes through beta oxidation. So you got to memorize that pathway and really understand how it works and how you can fix it based on organic acids testing. Glycolysis, pretty important, right? Because if this is screwed up, you have the early warning sign of insulin resistance. And insulin resistance is at the root cause of every bad thing that happens to the human body, every bad thing that happens to the human body. We don't have to elaborate on that. You should already know that, right? And then neurotransmission, well, a lot of patients have problems with depression and anxiety, and they have brain-related issues that we can fix rather quickly just using amino acids, okay? Methylation defects, they pop right up on this test too, because we measure folate, B6, and B12. We've got it all covered, okay? And then oxidative stress. That would be directly related to cardiovascular problems, right? If your tissues are getting oxidized, you're at higher risk for cancer, for heart disease, all the different sort of bad things that happen to the human body through the oxidative stress process. And it's simple. You see oxidative stress markers high, you give antioxidants. In some ways, this test is intimidating because you can interpret it at a complex level, but you don't have to. And so here again, on our biggest picture view, if you just corrected this one slide here, if you just corrected these issues, just these issues alone on every patient, you'd have a very successful practice. Here's our beta oxidation pathway. That is how we take fat or fatty acids and turn them into energy in the citric acid cycle. Here's glycolysis, that's carbohydrates, and how we turn glucose or carbohydrate into energy. And we're measuring whether these pathways are working or not. If these markers are high, there's a block here. If these markers are high, there's a block here. So when you see high markers on these metabolic profiles, it means the pathway is not working. It was just like if there was an accident on the freeway. I love it when it's in the opposite direction. I hate to say that, but it's true. I do. I'm driving on the freeway going maybe 72 miles an hour, and I look across and I'm like, whoa, all that traffic is stopped, but they're going the other way, and that's not going to affect me. If you live where I live, there's a sort of sense of glee to not being stuck in traffic. But what's happening? Why is there all this buildup of cars over there? Because something was blocked, right? The truck turned over and it blocked the freeway. So if these pathways get blocked, these enzymes here are not working, then guess what? The markers go up, just like cars accumulating on a freeway, because it can't get through. If these enzymes here to do with glycolysis are not working, then the markers go up, the lab markers go up, they accumulate. So high levels of these organic acids shows that the enzyme's not working. There's a block, a literal block in the enzyme. And we'll get into a little more detail on that. And how do you undo that block? Okay, well, the tow truck here that's going to pull the truck away is basically different nutrients. So if you've got a block in beta oxidation, because that enzyme's messed up, you give carnitine. How much? Like a lot, because the enzyme's not working. It's not like 100 milligrams and you're going to be like, okay, no, it's like a couple thousand milligrams of carnitine will just get that stupid little enzyme there to start working. And then guess what happens? You start to burn fat again. Or if you have like a high pyruvic acid or lactic acid, those are super high, and these enzymes not working here, then you give B vitamins and lipoic acid, and not just a tiny little bit, but a hefty dose, so that gets the enzyme working properly. That's how your body works, right? These are the cofactors, these nutrients are the cofactors that make the enzymes work. So if the enzyme's broken for whatever reason, whether it's an environmental reason or genetic reason, you could just turn it back on by knowing the pathway and giving the nutrient, but you got to give enough to make the enzyme work properly. And you never want to overdose people. We don't want to give people too much of anything, but you need to give adequate amounts. I think in the beginning, it's easiest to use combination products, honestly, because knowing that to get the mitochondria are working, you need carnitine, CoQ10, B vitamins, especially thiamine, lipoic acid, maybe free-form amino acids, PQQ, and a few other things. It's a little complicated, but to just use a combination mitochondrial supplement and say, hey, take 4 of these twice a day, that has all those ingredients in it is a lot easier way to deal with it. So if you have a mitochondrial combo product, if you have like a combination blood sugar product for glycolysis, that would be great. If you have one for the brain, and all these companies will make like a standard, it fixes your brain supplement that has all the nutrients you need for the neurotransmitter markers when they're positive. Same thing with your liver. The liver detox markers are, you don't have to memorize glutathione versus glycine and this and that. Just give a combination product in the beginning for liver detoxification pathways. And then what happens is that in the middle of your career, this is at least what happened to me, and I've seen this with most of my friends in functional medicine. In the middle of your career, I don't know, like 5, 10, 15 years in, you're like, wow, those combination products, I could do better than that. Like I'm gonna give 3,000 milligrams of glycine and 3,500 of arginine. I'm gonna give this special kind of glutathione you can only buy, from some sheep farmer in New Zealand, and you get into really complicated programs, in the middle of your life practice. And then you get kind of old and cranky like I am after 31 years, and you're like, I'm just gonna use combination products because they work really well. It's easier. Patients don't have as many side effects. And honestly, they work just about as well. So there's sort of a circle of life here. You start off simple, you get super complicated, and then you get old and cranky, you go back to being simple again. It's kind of ironic. So now I'm gonna take a pause here. I'm gonna take a sip of water because we're done with the beginning part of just trying to show you enzymes get messed up, they're not working, markers go high, you give a nutrient to fix the enzyme, okay? Now we're gonna get into the advanced concepts. So for those of you that have been doing this for a while, just hold on to your hats here. When I first met Richard, he told me about his experience as a graduate student at the University of Texas at Austin. And at that time, it was a serious heyday for nutrients. In fact, one of his professors, Roger Williams, discovered pantothenic acid. And I just had this image in my head. It's not on film, but I can just imagine Richard in his 20s sticking his head, out of his lab and looking down the hall, and Roger Williams running and saying, I found it, I just found pantothenic acid. Like, I know what it is. And this was happening left and right all around Richard, okay? And at the same time, they were starting to do organic acids testing for newborn babies. And so Richard's like, oh, wait a minute. Maybe these two things could go together. Maybe we could take organic acids tests that are used to detect life-threatening problems in babies and apply them to adults with different reference ranges. And it took 20 years till he actually kind of made that dream happen. But that's the origin story to what we're doing here. Now, what does that mean? It means that none of us are working with newborn babies, obviously, but it means that there is actually a whole group of geneticists that work with adults that have these genetic disorders, but they don't show up until adulthood. And in fact, I joined this society here. If you want to, you can take a snapshot of that. This is a group of adult metabolic physicians worldwide. And there's very few Americans in it. It's mostly people from other countries outside the US. So there's groups of scientists that are looking at this idea. There's a book that's been written about this, the first of its kind. If you want, you can go out and buy this book. I did. I think it's fascinating. But from a practical standpoint, we want to think about the concept. And here's an article. Again, this is an article from Neurology Clinical Practice. These are like what we call like mainstream scientific journals. This is not alternative medicine people at all. And they're demanding, Barry Wolf here is demanding that you think metabolic in adults with diagnostic challenges. And here, just quote right here, neurologists should consider the possibility of an inherited metabolic disorder in adults with neurologic symptoms that may or may not mimic those seen in affected children, such as in the case of biotin deficiency. Biotin deficiency, is that detected on this organic acids profile? Absolutely yes. There's a specific marker on this test that you guys are ordering for biotin deficiency. So we are now addressing functional expression. Richard calls it functional genomics. We're not testing the genes themselves. We're seeing if that enzyme that regulates biotin that's regulated by biotin is working or not. And if it's not working right, that patient has a major biotin deficiency. We can do all of these things. I'm just going to show you a few here because I don't want to overwhelm you, but there's mitochondrial disorders that can be genetically related. For sure, insulin resistance problems, and the classic of them all is the urea cycle. And these are all on the organic acids test that we're looking at all the time. So I don't want to overwhelm you with too much, but that gives me a headache just looking at that one. But the idea is that it's complicated, okay? And there's a lot of science behind this, and we're not just making these things up. But this is basically how your mitochondria work, is you're pulling in energy from carbohydrates and fats primarily, and then turning it into ATP, okay? And this can get screwed up in a whole wide variety of ways. And we're measuring, when we look at the test, we're measuring all these different pathways within the citric acid cycle. You're measuring each one of these steps, okay? It's pretty profound that you can even do that. You're measuring each one of these steps. And then you see where there's a block. So again, don't have to worry about the complicated part. Let's say that there's a block right here. What's going to happen? Malate or malic acid is going to build up. It's going to go high because that enzyme isn't working. Or there's a block right here. What's going to happen? Citrate is going to go high because that enzyme isn't working. So then what do? We just come along and give the nutrients that make that enzyme work, and the whole thing opens up and starts to function properly again. Glycolysis, same thing, same exact thing. Pyruvate is high. How are we going to get it down? Using the nutrients that drive that enzyme. Thiamine, riboflavin, niacin, lipoic acid, pantothenic acid. It's basically B vitamins and lipoic acid. And you just need to get the dosages up high enough that the enzyme starts to work. How do you know if you got a high enough dose? You can look in Richard Lord's books if you want. You can just study the general subject of clinical nutrition so you get your dosages right. And if you're worried about it, you do it for 90 days, you stop and you retest and you see if your dosages are right, the markers are going to be better. This is my favorite enzyme. It's the pyruvate dehydrogenase enzyme. It's complicated. This is actually an image of what it looks like when it's all fully baked, fully built out. So if this enzyme's not working well, can you see where we're going with this? What's going to be high? Pyruvate. Yep, you got it. Pyruvate dehydrogenase enzyme not working right. Pyruvate goes high. Do we see that on the test? Yes. Why did they develop this test? Originally for newborn babies. If you have a defect with this enzyme that's severe as a newborn baby, you could die. So they need to know that, and they need to be able to get a geneticist involved so you can get the proper treatment. Now, the one that I like the most, because no one ever talks about this, ever. Like, I've never seen a functional medicine lecture on this subject. I don't know why. It's just been completely ignored. But you see this in practice. You're going to see this in practice like at least once a month if you're busy. Maybe, let's not exaggerate, Dan. At least once a month if you have a busy practice. You're going to see urea cycle defects. This is the classic genetic disorder in which ammonia builds up. If it's a newborn baby, it's life-threatening, and you can look it up. They have a lot of neurological problems. If it's an adult onset version of this, they have neurological problems, but it's later in life, like they can't sleep. They have brain fog. Maybe they have numbness and tingling in their hands and feet or something. You know, they could just be tired all the time, but their brain isn't working right. And what you'll see is orotic acid is high. Sometimes it's low. If you want to get into the details on it, there's all these different enzymes involved. You can see the enzymes there. But the bottom line of it is they just need arginine and citrulline to get this pathway to work properly. Simple dimple. You just give arginine and citrulline, and the ammonia just comes right out. It's pretty amazing. It takes a little while, maybe takes 3 months or 6 months to get it all done, but you can completely fix these problems, okay? It's the same exact thing. The enzyme's not working, so the marker goes high. Enzyme's not working, so the marker goes high. That's kind of the mantra here. And just for fun, I found these articles like, look, this is like a real article. Who are these people? Department of Neurology, the Royal North Shore Hospital in Australia. Urea cycle disorders are inborn errors of metabolism that in rare cases can present for the first time in adulthood. Rare cases, I don't know. If it's severe enough that you're in a hospital and these folks get a hold of you, it's pretty rare. But again, in my practice, it's like once a month. When I was busy, it would be like once a month. So The form that happens to babies is very rare. The form that happens to adults that get involved with this kind of a crowd because they're in a hospital and they can't figure out what's wrong with the person is pretty rare. But the numbers of people with the same exact genetic defect that's very, very mild that show up in your office, it's probably like a once a month kind of thing. There's just too much ammonia in their brain, you get it out, they're going to feel better. And here's the same enzymes. I mean, this is all mapped out from these, geneticists and specialists that work on adults that have these problems. This is the exact same thing that we do in functional medicine. Urinary orotic acid. That's what you're measuring on this organic acids test from Diagnostic Solutions. And then you've got, if you want to get into the genes and the enzymes, you can get really specific. The treatments are all the same. It's arginine and citrulline for everybody. Okay, I put a slide in there that says pause. I must have anticipated that I was going to be, kind of revved up at this point because I really get into this genetic stuff, and I really want you guys to understand this. Oh, here's the protocols. Okay, so you can leave after this if you really are in a rush. Protocol for mitochondrial. You see high markers on citrate, malate, isocitrate. We're going to look at tests in a minute. There's your protocol right there. Don't use any of these protocols unless you really have a general understanding of clinical nutrition. You can't just throw this stuff at people. You got to know what medications they're on, what kind of contraindications are there to the supplements. Are they going to tolerate these things? So you have to do your, history and all this kind of stuff, medical workup to make sure it's safe to use these protocols. But that's the basic protocol, very effective for mitochondrial issues. If you have an insulin resistance problem, again, we're going to look at those markers in a second. Here's a protocol for that. Works incredibly well. And it's not like I made these things up, right? This is just me gathering information for you in one place. There's the scientific literature that backs all this up. There's the last maybe 40, almost 50 years now of clinical application by integrative and functional medicine doctors that back this up. But this stuff has been around for a while. Neurotransmitter protocol, tyrosine, 5-HTP, and these are all at max dosages. So again, you start low, taper up. It's the lowest effective dose that you want to use. And I'm just giving max protocols here. You don't want to go above these amounts for any of these things, but you've got all these. As a quick reminder for those of you that joined us late, if you scan that QR code and then remember or take a picture or something of DSL24, that's the code, the secret code that gets you a free masterclass that I built out on organic acids. So go for it. And it'll get you one more step into the work that we're doing here. Okay, so let's look at labs. And then we're going to look at a couple labs. We're right on time. We're at the half hour. We're going to look at a couple labs, and then we're going to have a break. We're going to have some wine and cheese and crackers. I'm kidding, because this isn't like a real conference. Normally we would have like wine and cheese and crackers, and then we come back. But we're going to look at labs, and then we're going to do questions. All right, so let's see here. I remember during the pandemic, it got so bad that at one point, my friends and I grew up in Berkeley, California, the Berkeley boys, we had like a virtual cocktail party. It was like the weirdest thing. We all like had a drink and we're talking. I mean, I'm so glad that's over. But it is a little odd to do these things online. I'll tell you. Let me find here. Here we go. All right, now we're getting into round 2. And then we'll do questions at the end, okay? And bingo, bingo. And here. All right, now let's get into it. Oh, sorry, I hit the wrong button. My bad. Can't believe I did that, sorry. Amateur mistake, apologize. Trying to do too many things at one time here. There we go. You can't tell this, but I have a couple different monitors running, and so this computer is getting a little freaked out by that. Hang on a second, let's see if I can make it work. There we go. Okay, so now this is the fun part. So they reformatted the lab. It's quite a bit easier to understand now. And I'm going to show you some real examples of the newly formatted lab from Diagnostic Solutions. They also have new equipment. So they just started doing this test, I don't know, within the last 3 years, 5 years, whatever. They have brand new equipment. They got the fancy machines. They're running these things. I mean, it's just a beautiful thing to see. Beautiful thing to see. So here's the basic summary page. Okay, and they have it broken down slightly differently than I do. For patient education reasons, again, metabolism, brain, detox, and gut. Metabolism, brain, detox, and gut. This has 5 sections in it. I don't think you need to mess with the 5th one. And I would use the words, keep the words as simple as you can. Metabolism, brain, detox, pathways, and gut. Because microbial metabolites, that's like a doctor phrase. As soon as you say microbial, you've lost people. And we want to keep it as simple as possible. So with this particular patient, metabolic issues, along with a B6 problem and a need for glutathione. And so you see these different sections highlighted on the summary page. I always look at this first. It gives you kind of an orientation to what's happening. And then we want you to get into the weeds and start to look at the details of the actual markers themselves. Vitamin B6 is one of the most important nutrients for human survival. And that marker there, xanthurenic acid, when that goes high, it means B6 is low. And that is a big problem. If your B6 is off, you're going to have just a world of pain happening. It's one of the most important nutrients for clinical nutrition people like us. So it's usually sold in a supplement form as P5P, peroxyl 5-phosphate, which is a coenzymated form of B6. It's absorbed a little bit easier. Okay, and how much do you give? I don't know, 50, 100 milligrams a day, would be typical. Once in a while, some people need 100, maybe twice a day. That would probably be where things start to max out. Okay. And then metabolic issues here, alpha hydroxybutyric acid. When that goes high, it indicates a glutathione deficiency. Pyroglutamic acid, when that goes high, it indicates a glutathione deficiency. When I first worked with Richard, like the first session where so I'd been in practice for 20 years. And then Richard just picks me out and decides, okay, I'm going to train this guy. And so we're on the phone. I thought I knew what I was doing, at least a little bit, but I had no idea what I was doing at all. Now I'm old enough to realize I still don't know at all what I'm doing, but at least I guess that comes as you get older. But anyway, so the first thing we did on the first session is he said, what's the most important marker on this organic acids test? And I was like, okay, this is a trick question. I had no idea. And he went right to the glutathione section and he started training me. Okay, so from the mind of Richard Lord, who's a scientist that developed this whole concept of adult testing for organic acids, the most important marker or markers are the markers that indicate glutathione deficiency. There's a reason for that, because if your glutathione is low, you've got cells being damaged and you're in some serious trouble. So those 2 markers, if that's all you remember from today is those 2 markers, super, super, super triple important, like the most important part of the test right there on the board now, okay? And you're going to have it when you're going to have low glutathione when you have what? Insulin resistance. You're going to have low glutathione when you have oxidative stress. You're going to have low glutathione when you have inflammation. You're going to have low glutathione when you're catabolic. You're going to have low glutathione when you have cancer. You're going to have low glutathione when you have cardiovascular disease. You're going to have low glutathione when you have chronic fatigue. You're going to have low glutathione when you have anything wrong with your body because your glutathione's low, your cells are getting damaged. Next issue here, glycolysis. That's the section that lets you know about the early warning signs of insulin resistance, perhaps even before insulin resistance has been detected. And remember I showed you the pyruvate dehydrogenase enzyme? Okay, well there's your pyruvic acid marker. Now you know, if that goes high, what does it mean? It means the enzyme's not working because they're nice at the lab. They even put the name of the enzyme right there. You don't even have to memorize that. How thoughtful is that? Look, there's the enzyme right there. It's like cheating. It's like an open book test. If I said, what's the pyruvic acid enzyme? It's right there. Pyruvate dehydrogenase. Remember I showed you the picture of it? That's the one that's my favorite. Then and then if you're going to say, well, that's cheating, but how do you get that enzyme to work? I don't remember. Look, they put them right there. It's thiamine, riboflavin, niacin, pantothenic acid, and lipoic acid. Like a cheat sheet for you. So you see high pyruvic acid in a patient, you tell them, oh, this enzyme is damaged. Let me show you a picture of that enzyme. Show them a picture of it. And they say, oh, well, to get that enzyme working, you need these B vitamins and lipoic acid. Simple, simple dimple. Okay, and it goes on from there, yeah? Lactate dehydrogenase, B3, et cetera, et cetera. This whole section, though, if you want to keep it simple, this whole section, B complex and lipoic acid, B complex and lipoic acid. In fact, I have the whole protocol written out for you guys, right? I just showed you the protocol. Here's your B6 marker. One of the most important nutrients on here is xanthurenic acid high. That means B6 is low. Why? Because when the enzyme's not working, the organic acid builds up. It's like a car accident causes a freeway to back up. And now, what's the most important section of the test? Well, here we're looking at it. Glutathione status. So when I get these labs back, I flip through the pages until I get to this section. It's the first thing I look at, because that's how Richard trained me. This is the most important thing on the test. So just draw your attention to it here. Okay? And then from there, you're like, oh, I have low glutathione. I wonder why. I wonder what that's affecting. Is that damaging the mitochondria? Let's look at the mitochondria and see. Is that damaging the body's ability to process insulin? Let's look at that and see, right? You can see that you start to put things together. Once you see glutathione as your home base, what's getting damaged? Is it mitochondria? Is it the brain? Is the liver not working right? You know, where's the problem? Okay. Go back to the 4 horsemen for a second. Nutritional support, again, B6. I think 20 milligrams is a little low. I would start with 50 if I were you guys. And if they have a glutathione, glutathione problem, I think those dosages are a little low. I'd probably start with, I don't know. Richard would say 3,000. That's maybe too high. If you're a beginner, maybe at least 1,000 or two. Lipoic acid, at least 600. Another patient, anxiety, stress. Remember I mentioned the 4 horsemen and catabolic physiology, that is the stress response. Homovanillinic going high, cortisol going high, sounds like a stress response. And there they are right there. Homovanillinic and vanilmandelic shining brightly. Those are the markers for the catecholamines. If they go high or low, it means different things, but basically it means you have a problem with neurotransmitters. There's another wonderful marker on here that it's on this particular test, it's okay, but I just want to point it out because this is an important one you have to look at, which is 5-HIAA, and that's a marker for serotonin. Okay, that's a serotonin marker. And then these two here, oh my gosh, these three here, and then also this ratio, that tells you whether the person has neuroinflammation or not. Look, see that? Neuroinflammatory, neuroprotective balance. This tells you whether the patient has neuroinflammation or not. Don't you think everybody wants to know if their brain is inflamed? Is anybody not worried about Alzheimer's or cognitive decline or memory loss? If your brain is inflamed, you're heading for a bad place with brain function as you get older. It would be worth doing this test just for this one section alone, neuroinflammation. You got to then figure out where the inflammation is coming from, obviously, but now you know, oh, your brain is inflamed. That is not a good thing. Depression and inflammation, another case here. Vanilmandelic low, 5-HIAA low, quinolinic high. Remember quinolinic, when it goes high, it means there's neuroinflammation present. Quinolinic acid is neurotoxic. It damages brain cells. Low 5-HIAA, low serotonin, low vanilmandelic, low epinephrine and norepinephrine. And here you go, just right here on the test. So easy, so profound at the same time. These are low, you give tyrosine. I would do 1,000 3 times a day. If you're not used to this and you're brand new, you got to make sure it's safe to do that, but maybe do 500 3 times a day if you're worried about it, okay? These are the catecholamine markers. This means the person's in catabolic physiology. They're breaking things down. That is not good. You want people to be building up, not breaking down. And then here, again, the neurotransmitter marker I mentioned a second ago, super important, 5-HIAA, that drops. That's a drop in serotonin. Does not feel good to have low serotonin. And then here's our neuroinflammatory section here. See this section here, neuroinflammatory? Quinolinic is high. That means the brain is inflamed, and quinolinic itself is a neurotoxin. Not a good thing to have happening in your brain. These are like fundamental issues. See how important this is? Like metabolic function, insulin resistance, glutathione status or antioxidant status, what's happening with the person's brain. These don't seem to be optional to me. I wouldn't save this test for really sick patients. And again, these dosages are understandably low. The lab, it's not their job to tell you what to do, clinician-wise. That's what my job is. So 1,000 milligrams 3 times a day, 5-HTP, somewhere between 100 and 300 at night. If you don't know what you're doing, then stick with these, here, or get into a class, like take my class, take someone else's class, find a doctor that, can help you with the dosing. Patient with fatigue, taking an SSRI. Again, they have the summary page here. More markers there, more there, and then here I want to show this. And then we're going to go to questions in 1 minute. So if you have a question, type it in. I'll get to as many as I can, okay? So here's glycolysis. We talked a lot about this. Pyruvate dehydrogenase. If that enzyme's not working right, you give these nutrients and you'll fix it. And this is not like, I don't know how to say it. It's not like your personal opinion or my personal opinion. It doesn't matter whether the patient lives in Indiana or they live in, Michigan. It doesn't matter really at all. This is just an enzyme in the human body. And if you give these nutrients, it works properly. It's not about what the person's eating even usually. It's more about their genetics and how their body's interacting with their environment and environmental toxins and those kinds of things. This is the citric acid or Krebs cycle right here. Again, you can see these markers high. Now you know carbs are backing up. Enzymes aren't working right. So what does that mean for energy production? Not so great. How does a person experience that? They're tired. Their memory's not that great. Their heart's not working like it should. They don't recover from exercise really well. They feel just exhausted and stressed all the time. And then what do you do to fix it? I have a slide on it. Remember, CoQ10, magnesium, B vitamins, free-form amino acids, carnitine, all that good stuff. Or if you want to keep it simple, just use combination products. So profound. Oh my gosh, this is my favorite one here. We could do this all day. This is really important, fatty acid oxidation. Like you got to screen this on everybody. You just have to. You can't just let patients go and out of that room and not know if they can burn fat for energy or not. You just can't do that. It's not safe. These markers go high. This patient is not burning fat for fuel. Where's that fat going? To not great places. This is a heart attack waiting to happen, right? This is like preventive cardiology, if you want to call it that. And how do you fix it? Carnitine. You give carnitine, a couple grams of carnitine a day, and you'll get these enzymes working again, and the person will start to burn fat again properly and not do bad things with that fat. It's really important. This stuff is super important. The B vitamin markers, we could do a whole class on that. But I know I want to leave time for questions, but it's one other section I want to show you. Oh, here you go. Because this marker is so important, you got to memorize this one. This is one of the more famous of all these markers here, 8-OHDG, 8-hydroxy-2-deoxyguanosine. And this has been featured in tens of thousands of research studies, tens of thousands. You could never read all the research just on this one marker here and its relationship to cancer, relationship to heart disease. This is really important. If this marker goes high, it means there's a lot of oxidative stress. And then I'll just pose a question and I'm not going to answer it. This marker is undetected, so DL means underneath the detected limit. So that makes you wonder, is in oxidative stress, in the case of oxidative stress, is lower the better? Do you just want to drive that number as low as possible, or can you have not enough oxidative stress? Interesting question. I'm not going to answer it because there's a lot of questions out here. So let me jump here. We have a few minutes for questions left over. You guys, thank you for joining this class. I really just want to inspire you to start to order tests. It's the most important thing that's happened to my practice is this lab Richard Lord training me in this lab is the most important thing that's happened probably in my whole career. So I just want you to embrace it. Don't be afraid of this. Just get the testing done. Join our classes. We have free master classes available. We have paid boot camps available. I teach this stuff all the time. Just look at our website. You'll see all kinds of organic acids tests. We work really closely with DSL Labs, and we have all kinds of things coming up with them to get you guys trained, okay? Let's see. I think you guys are, let's see. Yeah, so there's a bunch of different supplement brands that are usable for this. Just use a good quality, professional brand. Yeah, so for Bridget's question, I use Designs for Health has a product called mitochondrial NRG, like NRG, kind of cutesy name. And that product, 2 to 4 capsules once or twice a day. It has all the carnitine, CoQ10, B vitamins in it. That's the one that I use the most if you want a combo product for mitochondria. Uh, I'm not gonna be able to get to all the questions, just to let you guys know that, okay? Oh, and then what's the combo product for brain? I just use Crave a Rest from Designs for Health. 2 capsules, breakfast, lunch, and dinner. With meals, it's better. It's complicated, but it's better with food. 2 capsules of Crave a Rest. It has 5-HTP and tyrosine and all the cofactors in it. So if you want to work on the brain, Crave a Rest is the combo product. It'll cover off on both the catecholamine markers and the serotonin markers at the same time, so you can use it for everybody. Convenient. It's like a one-size-fits-all thing. So Crave a Rest, 2 capsules, breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Mitochondrial NRG, either 2 to 4 twice a day. That one has to be with food or it'll upset this person's stomach because it's got a lot of bees in it. So mitochondrial NRG, 2 to 4 capsules twice a day with dinner, with meals. Okay. And then the combo, I mean, it's all designs for health stuff, but it's what I use in my practice. The combo product for all the liver detox stuff is Amino Detox. It's like the best design product of all time. I just use that stuff all the time. It really works, okay? So that one, Amino Detox from Designs, 3 capsules once a day. It's like a starter dose. 3 capsules twice a day is what I actually do all the time. But one of the senior doctors in our class was just saying she just uses 3 once a day, gets good results. But I use 3 twice a day. It's a little more aggressive. Okay, so there's the combo products. So L-carnitine, oftentimes people will substitute acetyl L-carnitine. Acetyl L-carnitine can be a substitute for L-carnitine. So JE, you can look that up. Acetyl L-carnitine is quite a bit more expensive, but it avoids a lot of the side effects of regular L-carnitine. Okay, and the dosing is the same. Biofilm disruptors. I don't use them ever. Like I've never prescribed a biofilm disruptor. Just being honest with you. So I don't seem to need to use them. I don't know, but N-acetylcysteine is one. So I use N-acetylcysteine with everybody. So if you consider NAC a biofilm disruptor, then I use that with almost every patient, but I don't use the regular biofilm ones. Here's a good one. So this is from Carolyn. How sensitive is organic acids testing? Pretty sensitive. You just need to learn how to interpret them well. In the beginning first few tests, you may be a little overwhelmed. You're probably going to have to be overwhelmed. But once you get familiar with it, it just becomes the most valuable tool you could imagine. So let's see, what supplements for each protocol? So I think I mentioned them all now. Amino Detox for the detox, 3 either once or twice a day. That's probably better on an empty stomach. For the mitochondrial programs, mitochondrial NRG, 2 to 4 twice a day, but with meals, not at night, obviously, because it gives you energy. So 2 to 4 with breakfast, 2 to 4 with dinner, or I'm sorry, 2 to 4 with breakfast, 2 to 4 with lunch. And then Oh, and then Crave Arrest, it's a funny name. It does reduce sugar cravings, but Crave Arrest has the 5-HTP and tyrosine in it. For any of these neurotransmitter markers, you can use Crave Arrest, 2 capsules, breakfast, lunch, and dinner. You can do Crave Arrest on an empty stomach, but I think it's easier for people to remember when they take it with meals. Okay, so that covers off on that. Uh, oh, low lactic acid. So lactic acid is a fuel supply. Lactic acid is the primary and preferred fuel supply for the brain and the heart. Lactic acid is the fuel supply, preferred fuel supply for many parts of your body. I know that sounds a little strange, but there's a scientist at Berkeley, Berkeley, go Bears, named George Brooks, who's been studying lactate for 40 years. And he's not like sitting around in a coffee shop talking about it. He's in the lab. He runs the famous lab. See that guy on the bike there? Like he's testing his lactate. And here it is, little quote. George Brooks has been trying to reshape thinking about lactate. Finally, it seems people are listening after 40 years. It takes a little while, right? And here we go. Lactate is becoming clear. It's not a poison. It's the antidote. So you got to read about this. Recent article in Cell Metabolism. These are really major medical journals, right? Anyways, since the 70s, he's been promoting this. So if you want to get into it, just Google George Brooks. And so lactate being low can be really good or really bad, depending on the context. I know that's confusing, but it could be that you're clearing it really well because you're so efficient, because you're like a super athlete, or it could be that you don't have enough mitochondria to even make all this happen, and you're under doing your energy. So that one can go either way. And that's true for a lot of organic acids markers. Generally, high is bad. In some cases, low is better, but sometimes too low is even worse than high. And you have to learn that per marker. And I'm going to answer the question I posed. Yes, you can have not enough oxidative stress. Let me say that again. Yes, you can have not enough oxidative stress. What does that mean? That means that every nutrient can be a toxicant. Let's say you have someone that comes into your office and they have their oxidative stress markers are perfect. But you don't know this because you didn't test them, but they are. They have no problems with oxidative stress. And you put them on a whole bunch of vitamin E and CoQ10 because you think those are healthy. And you drive their oxidative stress load too low. It's going to make them worse. Think about it. You can have not enough oxidative stress. An antioxidant can be dangerous if you're giving it to the wrong person. That's why we do the testing. If their oxidative stress levels are high, it's the best thing you could do for them. If their oxidative stress levels are not high, it could be dangerous potentially. Okay. Oh, ALA, alpha lipoic acid dose. Usually it's around 600 a day. You could adjust for body weight if you had to. Let's see. I'm trying to scan these questions because there's so many of them. Oh, what could cause high succinic? Thank you, Jana. So succinate dehydrogenase. That's my other favorite enzyme. And Jana, thank you for asking that. I don't know why you asked that, but I'm so glad you did. So succinate dehydrogenase. I have a picture of it. I know this seems kind of silly, but you want to make this real. You know what I mean? You want this to be, this is like real stuff. This isn't like even really about food and nutrition. It's much more profound than that. Let me see if I can find my succinate dehydrogenase here. Yeah, look at that. I have it right here. This is my favorite enzyme. It's so cool. Look at this. What a beautiful enzyme that is. That's what it looks like. Succinate dehydrogenase. So guess what? When that gets screwed up, succinate goes high. Okay, that makes sense, yeah? And that is the enzyme that's the most sensitive to environmental toxins. Call it a design flaw, I don't know. But the thing about succinate dehydrogenase is that one enzyme is involved in two things. You see succinate here? It's complex 2 of the electron transport chain. This is the electron transport chain. That's how you make energy. But succinate is also part of the Krebs cycle or citric acid cycle. It does both. It does both. So if succinate dehydrogenase is high, if succinate is high, succinic acid is high, it means you've got a damage here to your electron transport chain. That's like cutting off someone's head or something. That's like the worst thing you could do. That's like, right? Because this is like, now you can't make ATP. There's not like a backup complex too. There's like one of them here. And it's sitting right there in your citric acid cycle. It's in both places at the same time. And it's very prone to environmental toxin damage. There it is, electron transport chain. And there's the actual enzyme and what it looks like. Okay. So here's again succinate dehydrogenase. Now, okay, so now the next question is, okay, what are the things that make this enzyme work? Well, here you go. Riboflavin and ubiquinol, CoQ10. B vitamins and CoQ10 get this enzyme working properly. How many people have problems with these enzymes? A lot, because we're all exposed to environmental toxins. It's just a matter of, are you handling it well or not? And here's another image of that enzyme. So here, this is the enzyme again, right here. It's part of the Krebs cycle, and it's part of the electron transport chain. So if that thing is screwed up, you got some major mitochondrial or metabolic problems. So what happens if you get an environmental toxin exposure? This enzyme gets screwed up. On the lab test, you'll see succinic acid high. Succinic acid is high. You know the enzyme is not working right. You then give CoQ10 and B vitamins, and you get the enzyme to work. This is one of the many reasons, but one of the important reasons why environmental toxins cause people to get fat. Environmental toxins cause weight gain because environmental toxins damage this enzyme. Now you can't make energy. So instead of burning up all that fuel, you store it as fat. This is a damaged metabolism, right? It's a picture of a damaged metabolism from environmental toxins. So Jana, that's probably more than you wanted to hear, but that was a great question. I appreciate it. And I think we're at time now. Okay, so we're going to officially stop right now because the hour is up. And I want to thank you guys for participating. If anybody wants to linger around after the talk is over, I'll stay here and continue to answer questions or ask them, continue to answer questions, just like at a regular conference. Okay, time's up. Everyone can leave the room now. But those of you that want to hang around, please do. And I'm going to take another pause here, and then we'll answer a few more questions. Okay, so let's see what else we got. Now we're after official time. Oh, this is a good one. Edna, I don't know how to pronounce your name, Edna. How do you prepare people for the organic acids test? I was going to say a stiff drink, but that's not funny. You want them to stop all their supplements, 3 days before, maybe a week before. I never stop any medications. Obviously, stay on all the medications, but you don't want them taking supplements right before. Especially things like probiotics and antioxidants and stuff like that. Anything that you're measuring, you don't want them taking right before. Let's see here. Oh yeah, so let me just show you the actual testing. That's confusing. Didn't realize that. So I'm gonna show you, here's the actual lab, company's website, Diagnostic Solutions Lab. And it's the OAP Organic Acids profile. You can see that there? Okay, it's everything that we're talking about is on that one test. So if you go to the test homepage here, you go to OAP, everything that we're talking about is on this one test. So simple. It's a urine sample, it's easy to do. It's not even that expensive in the scheme of what people spend money on. It's very affordable. And basically, you should just be doing this test with everybody, okay? They do have a more complicated test for those of you that want complicated. You can do a blood test with your organic acids, and they call that the omics. Omics, organic metabolomics. So this is not a starter test, but I think Hillary asked the question, if you're very advanced, Hillary, and you've been doing this for a long time, this is the super advanced version. It's got the plasma amino acids. Just make sure you order the plasma version of it. So it's a urine sample and a blood sample. It's way too much information for most of us in our first 5 years, but if you're advanced, you've been doing this for a long time, then the omics is totally appropriate. It's the worst test to learn on. You want to learn on the first couple years, this one here, but if you're advanced, you can do the omics for sure. And again, the omics requires urine sample and blood, and it gives you tons more data. You can also do urine only for the omics. That's fine too. I mean, probably more people do that. I prefer the plasma omics test, but people argue back and forth about that one. You can do it either way. And if you have specific questions about tests, obviously you can contact the lab too. Once we're going to run out of time here in a minute. Let's see. Can you do it at home? Yeah, it's just a urine sample. Yeah, super simple. You just do the urine collection and send it off. Out of all the urinary organic acids tests, I mean, there's different companies. They all have different views of this, and the test markers are quite different. In my mind, this is really the best organic acids test. So let's see. I think we're getting through most of the questions, and we're way over time, so I better wrap it up here. I'm going to start to get yelled at. Okay, thank you guys for attending. I hope to see you soon in another one of these. Remember, we have a free webinar or masterclass you can get access to. We have lots of paid courses that we have coming up as well if you really want to study this stuff. And I'll look forward to seeing you at the next one. All right, bye now.